Hi everyone, it's Natalie. I want to do a video today about the death card and about why the death card is most decidedly got nothing to do with death. And I feel I can speak on this topic officially as an end-of-life doula and someone whose job it is to be with death and to be with dying. I've been working with where did it go? It's here. I've been working this month with the Marielle Tarot, which, as I understand it from online, it's a pretty controversial deck for many reasons. It has a lot of nudity in it, which I don't think is offensive. I've never found nudity offensive. Kind of nifty and cool, yes, but offensive, no. Of course, a lot of the artwork in it is really beautiful. So this is a deck that I have chosen this month. And I was working actually with last month, although I wasn't tracking my cards, my daily draws as much. I have now changed that, and for the month, starting the month of March, I actually started really tracking my daily draws and tracking my work officially with the Marielle Tarot, which I'm learning so much about this deck. So one day in the last month has yielded the death card for me. This card popped up for me on a Saturday after I had spent a week working intensively as an SSD, or a special school district paraprofessional, which means that I was assisting an autistic student all week. And I had absolutely bonded with this child. She was just beautiful. And we had this kind of beautiful symbiotic connection between the two of us that was delightful. And I had gotten to, but it was exhausting. It was also really exhausting. And it's not work I'm accustomed to doing. So I got to the Saturday and realized, wow, I really need to go. I need to do something for myself that's very gentle and very kind. And so I booked a float. So like a sensory deprivation float in a pod. It's very sci-fi and really restorative and delightful. And if I could have one in my house, I probably would. Suffice it to say, I got all of that booked and settled, and then sat down and decided to do a daily draw, and this was the card that popped up. And the way I interpreted it that day was, it's not that the thought didn't run through my head, gee, did I just lose a client and didn't know it? And I kind of, I did the old, Star Wars trick of like, Luke, stretch out with your feelings. Kind of felt into the space around me and was like, no, I did not lose a client today. That's not what this is about. And I sat with it for just a second. I thought, this is about dying to the world for a little while. It's about letting go. Look at her hair. Her hair looks as though she could be lying in water. Because when you have a lot of hair and you lie in water, it does spread out like that around you, right? So that's what I did. I went and had a float, and I died to the world for an hour and a half, and it was absolutely, utterly delightful and restorative. And it was like going into my little cocoon, and coming back out as a butterfly, right? So very much a transformation. Okay, now, this week, so last week, actually, on the day that I had the trouble with the school and with everything else, I did not do a daily draw. I did a tarot pulse reading later in the day, but that morning I had just completely forgotten about doing a daily draw, and I just left it alone. It would have been interesting to know what card would have come up around that. And I can't say that the Tower card came up that day. The Tower card, okay, another card a lot of us have been taught to fear, because on an archetypal journey, as a survivor of this moment, it is one of the ugliest things you'll ever go through. If you really do, and if you really, this is part of why I love the Mariel Tarot, right? Because she's clearly been on a self-transformative journey and come out on the other end of it, and it changed her. And it's in part, I think, why it can be so cryptic and difficult to read her book. And I think in some parts it's why, this is just not an easy deck to try and adapt to everyday things. It's not necessarily an everyday deck. I don't think it will be a deck I would like to become fluent in, as a tarot language, but I don't know that it's a deck that I would really want to put on a client, right? Depending on the client. Really would have to depend on the client. At any rate, this moment in one's life is, you will never be the same again after this, ever. But when I went through this moment, and it wasn't, it's never just like one moment. It's usually a process. The sort of thing that was the result of it was a recognition that being with death is something that I can do. And not only that I can do, but that feels right to me, as something that is necessary, and that is part of my journey, part of like a divine agreement, right? So when I've been working with clients, sometimes this is frequently, it pops up, especially where, the work is going to be kind of heavy, right? Like, be prepared. This is going to be a heavy day with this client, right? You're going to need all of your skills, all of your faculties. They're going to all need to be there. Similarly, this is a card, right? The Two of Discs, that comes up as well. And in Mariel's deck, right, in Marie White's deck, the Two of Discs takes on almost a kind of mindfulness-based connotation, right? One coin represents looking outward, and one coin represents looking inward. And if you're trying to hold the balance between the two of those, you are being mindful deeply. So this has been a card that comes up, and it seems to it'll come up on a day where I can expect to sit quietly a lot, and where I may need to put extra effort into monitoring how much do I need to attend, to be aware that my own needs will be easily overlooked, right? The client's needs might end up trumping my own, which isn't going to be helpful. So to be mindful, keeping one eye turned very, very gently inward, and just paying attention to, like, okay, how is my body in this moment? And is there something that I might need right now? That can come up. Okay. Earlier this week, after having the stuff happen on Friday, and before the amazing, like, the IRS saved the day, before the cash infusion from the IRS, and by the way, I attended a funeral over the weekend, of a dear friend, actually, a family friend that died, and it was an expected death, but of course it's never easy, right? Even when it's your job to be around death is never, when it's somebody and care about, that's never easy. But even then, I think I had completely different cards, and interesting, none of them were majors. They were minors, interestingly. And I can't remember offhand what they were. However, I got to Monday and Tuesday and started to think, okay, what do I do with myself? Because I should have had money. I don't have anything coming in. this is a really difficult moment, etc. And I ended up with the moon. Okay, the moon is a very strange card to get when you were intending to spend your day looking for a job, right? Or looking for something that would provide more cash in hand, right? So in confusion over that message, I did what I do, what we all do, right? Went back to the book, and in her book, around the moon, now is not the time to act, right? Things coming up from the subconscious, staying still, staying quiet. You know, she's got all of the meanings that you would normally have for a major arcana or arcana card, right? But then she layers in lots and lots and lots of additional things that you can keep in mind. But, you know, in her keywords section, you know, it ends with now is not the time to act. Stay quiet, dark, shrouded, head down, mouth closed, wait. So that surprised me because I wasn't expecting, right? I wasn't expecting that to be the case. And I thought, no, that's really weird. I would have expected to get the Four of Swords, right? I don't anticipate something as simple as just be quiet and still and don't do anything, you know, to come up. I mean, it didn't feel like a really particularly major arcana moment to me. It felt more like it should have been this, right? It wasn't, it was the moon. But I made note that this is what I was thinking, like, wow, it's interesting to me that it didn't come up as like Four of Swords, right? If it's just like, don't, you know, maybe don't do anything, don't take any action, stay balanced, stay quiet. All right, we get to the day of cash infusion, and I got Temperance, right? Moderation, balance, or in this case, interestingly, right, she shows she gives a very different interpretation. Energy flows powerfully, beautifully, symmetrically, etc. Right? So she's got this, you know, hers is about restoration of balance through a flood, a charge, a surge, right? And there was enough money coming in from the IRS, you know, that was more of a charge or a surge, right? And even still, I could see multiple other ways in which moderation was actually very important. So I acted all day with moderation and care, and thought, well, maybe that's what the message is, and I won't worry about the tiger and the surge and the, you know, the waves in the water, right? Only to realize when I checked my bank account, you know, later in the evening, holy crap, there was this big, you know, rebalancing surge. Okay. Pretty major, right? Pretty major. Well, so that was yesterday. Today, you know, I get a phone call in the morning, saying, you know, that I had a client basically that had, started to enter the very final phases of the dying process. And so it was clear I needed to pack up and get prepared to go in and sit potentially up to 48 hours, right, with this client and client family. So I did my daily draw. I packed everything up first, and then I did my daily draw. My daily draw came out as the Four of Swords. Now, I will tell you that by the time I reached my client, he was deceased. When I drew this card, I remember looking at it, and because, you know, the Marielle deviates so much from, and again, I think it's why so many of us in this community really wrestle with this particular deck. I think we found that this was a better angle here, yeah. It feels cryptic. The language is not a familiar one to us. It is not consistent across all the cards. It feels like there's multiple types of voices that speak through this deck, right? And so what I have found in my study of it is that I need to have keywords. And I started reading cards when I was in my late teens, right? I'm 43 now. I haven't really worked with keywords for a long time because I don't... I have a glass ball that just dropped out of nowhere. I hope it didn't break. Did you break? Ooh, that just dropped. Thankfully, it did not break. Okay, well, who knows what that was about. It's a very old house, and where it had it hanging may have been not... It's a very heavy ball. It may not have been strong enough to support the weight of it. Oops. Where was I? Oh, keywords in the tarot. So I haven't used keywords in the tarot for a very long time because the meanings of, really for me, the meanings of the RWS deck are so deeply, deeply entrenched as a language in my mind. And I think this is a fair thing to say. Like, most of us know, like, if you have one, especially with this deck, if you study it for long enough, you know, it's very easy when you pick up another deck, if it's in any way based on RWS or if it's a pip deck, right? If you need to cheat, in the sense that, you know, you can't maybe get the meaning from that pip deck, or you're really struggling to derive, you know, a helpful meaning for yourself or for a client, you can just call to mind like, oh yes, I know what the Four of Swords looks like, right? Okay, so don't know what else to do, so I'm going to take this Marseille card and I'm going to read it like a Four of Swords in the RWS deck, for example, right? Let's just say. Well, you know, I was looking at this card and I have a keyword for it. And the keyword that I have for it is fertile retreat, because the meaning of the card is not that far different from the RWS Four of Swords. But in my mind, I was seeing this. Right? Now, this is a card that has come to have a meaning. This could take a second here because I'm going to see if I can fish out one of my mother piece cards. The meaning of this one, what I'm seeing more often than not, is that the Four of Swords takes on, yeah, here we go, takes on a meaning much more like this. I've just lost the light on my computer there. Here we go. Right? It's about meditation and quiet. Okay. When you read the Four of Swords description in the Marielle Tarot, it couldn't be further from that. Suffice it to say, I pulled it up and opened it because I thought, okay, where did I come up with fertile retreat? Well, the Four of Swords starts here, right, on this page, and then it carries on for another 2 pages, and fully I counted 1, like 3, no less than 3 full paragraphs of really obscure meanings that are to do with gods literally fertilizing things with semen or male body parts. It's, you know, male sexual anatomy that's cut off and thrown somewhere. It's, you know, very, very cryptic. Okay. When it gets down to it, the keywords she has, you know, thoughts take root, words have wings, sex, impregnation, consummation of a union, plant a seed, growth in solitude, safe retreat, etc. Right? This is kind of not really, where are we? Well, we have the card. What am I thinking? This is not really what I get. from this one. So it's no wonder that we really struggle to connect, right? But if you think of it this way, what's inside these clouds is pretty fertile and heavy with rain, right? It's going to rain. It's the calm before the storm. And then if you look down here, my mom was looking at this deck. My mother is not a card reader. She's fascinated by art, and she's really very naive about art, and in some ways, I mean, because she's not an artist, but in other ways she's brilliant. But she was reading this and she was like, I want to know what those towers and those smokestacks at the bottom are about. Right? And I said, I'm sure there must be something in the book here. And I went fishing for it. And this is not a quick read, to say the very least, right? So what I was seeing as I pulled this up in my head was this. And I thought, now that's interesting. I wonder what the message of that is. And I opened up, thankfully, and I have it right here, although we're losing light very quickly. I have Benabel Wen's Holistic Tarot here. So I pulled up her meaning for the Four of Swords that she's got, because it's a wonderful compendium. And what I came up with, interestingly, and that I hadn't really thought about in a long time was, that this is colored yellow, the sword is, and the guy, because of illness, right? And what happened when I walked into the room where my client was, and he had passed just before I got there, he was very yellow. He had this kind of yellow pallor to his skin. So on a day where someone is going to die, right, this was not the message. This was not the message. Not only that, but something like the Four of Swords and any card, let's say any card that we get, especially if it's just one, there's so many layers within that card, right? If my key word for this card in this particular deck is fertile retreat, right? That things are quiet and calm, that there may be things that come to me in that calm and in that stillness that are, that plant seeds or that yield ideas, things that help me move forward. That was also a big part of today, right? So did I walk, but this was the card I pulled, and yet what popped into my mind was this, right? So there was something in my subconscious that knew, it won't be 48 hours, it'll be right now. It'll be, I think it was really not very long after I drew the card, actually. Not very long after, maybe an hour. No, less than that even. It may have just happened actually, right when I drew the card, because they didn't get a chance to call and tell me until I was already on my way there. So, not about death. Death card, not about death. We go to look and see what is, what's in our daily draw, what do the cards have in store for us. They have so many different messages. And the thing is, too, it's so individual to every human being that reads cards. It's completely individual. We never know one day to the next when we draw a card what we're going to get or what that's going to mean. We can't know. So the key is to learn by doing and by drawing these cards and reading them for yourself. It will deepen your knowledge. It will deepen your meaning every time. And it will start to teach you a great deal about who you are and about what your strengths are. And it will start to give you a shape to your life that Well, I can only really speak from my own experience, but it gives me a greater, broader context even than meditation, or certainly even the meditation by itself could bring. And that's actually really humbling in ways that I really could not have anticipated. So I just wanted to share that. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the cards that are scary. Don't be afraid. Everything will be okay. And death, you know, I mean, it's not the end. It's just not. We don't know for sure what is coming after we die, but to be afraid of death is really almost to be afraid of living. And that sounds kind of cliche, but the truth is, if we live in our lives afraid of death, afraid of disaster, afraid of difficult things that could be just around the corner, we won't really live. We won't really go out and master our lives, master ourselves in a way that leaves us feeling fulfilled, and as though, when we go and take our little walk, we don't know that the fool is at the beginning or the end, because he's a zero. He's joyfully on his way at the beginning, and he's joyfully on his way at the end. If we can go through life in many respects embodying all parts of the tarot and come out walking as joyfully and lightly and open-heartedly as this fool can, it won't matter. If we die, if we encounter disaster, it really won't matter, because it will be okay. Thank you for watching.